Hi. When David and I found our first home church, the church we settled in for more than 20 years, that would be in the early 1990s, that particular church had a reading group that met monthly, and they were reading C.S. Lewis books. We attended and we read C.S. Lewis. So that was how I became quite familiar with a lot of C.S. Lewis, his writings. One of my favorites was this book. I don't know if you can see that. Fern-seed and Elephants, a collection of essays. And in the preface, Walter Hooper, who was the editor, wrote this about Lewis. He says, Lewis's books never cease being popular. Lewis's genuine and enduring value, that which continues to endear him to a growing number of readers, lies in his ability not only to do combat, but to cleanse, to provide for the mind an authentic vision of the faith, which purge and replaces error, uncertainty, and especially the presumptuousness of those who, as Lewis says in this book, claim to see fern-seed and can't see an elephant 10 yards away in broad daylight. So I credit Lewis with giving me much help in understanding the Christian faith and for purging and replacing errors, or I would say prejudices, that I had held because of being a former Jehovah's Witness. When one leaves a cult, which is what I view J.W. Org as, its teachings don't automatically leave you. So I needed help with what was things that I was uncertain about, but also I would say the many teachings that I presumptuously believed were truth because I had been taught them by the Watchtower. The book contains 8 essays. I read one of them in a former video called Membership, that particular essay. The one that I'm focusing on today is Learning in Wartime, which is a discussion about learning and education during any period of crisis. Now, when I share things from C.S. Lewis's books, I'm oftentimes focusing on things that I found helpful because of having been a Jehovah's Witness. So that's where I'm going to focus in this discussion. Having grown up as a Jehovah's Witness, education beyond what was necessary was really discouraged, I would say, within the Watchtower. If it wasn't said to be just a waste of time, it would at least be viewed as selfish because we were living in the last days. With that in mind, this is what Lewis says in that particular, I'm just reading portions from that particular essay. He says, "It is clear that Christianity does not exclude any of the ordinary human activities. St. Paul tells people to get on with their jobs. He even assumes that Christians may go to dinner parties. And, what is more, dinner parties given by pagans. In most of the Christian ages, learning and arts flourish. The solution of this paradox is, of course, well known to you. Whether ye eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. All our merely natural activities will be accepted if they are offered to God, even the humblest, and all of them, even the noblest, will be sinful if they are not. Christianity does not simply replace our natural life and substitute a new one. It rather is a new organization which exploits, to its own supernatural ends, these natural materials. No doubt in a given situation, it demands the surrender of some or of all are merely human pursuits. He further says about the pursuit of knowledge and beauty. He says, in a sense, for their own sake, but in a sense which does not exclude their being for God's sake. An appetite for these things exists in the human mind, and God makes no appetite in vain. A cultural life will exist outside the church, whether it exists inside or not. To be ignorant and simple now, not to be able to meet the enemies on their own ground, would be to throw down our weapons and to betray our uneducated brethren, who have, under God, no defense but us against the intellectual attacks of the heathen. Good philosophy must exist, if for no other reason, because bad philosophy needs to be answered. The cool intellect must work not only against cool intellect on the other side, but against the muddy heathen mysticisms which deny intellect altogether. Most of all, perhaps, we need intimate knowledge of the past. Not that the past has any magic about it, but because we cannot study the future, and yet need something to set against the present, to remind us that the basic assumptions have been quite different in different periods, and that much which seems certain to the uneducated is merely temporary fashion. A man who has lived in many places is not likely to be deceived by the local errors of his native village. The scholar has lived in many times and is therefore in some degree immune from the greatest cataract of nonsense that pours from the press and the microphone of his own age. The learned life then is, for some, a duty. The only people who achieve much are those who want knowledge so badly that they seek it while the conditions are still unfavorable. Favorable conditions never come. That's it. You have to make time for what is important. He also encourages us to leave the future in God's hands. We may as well, for God will certainly retain it, whether we leave it to him or not. Never in peace or war commit your virtue or your happiness to the future. Happy work is best done by the man who takes his long-term plans somewhat lightly and works from moment to moment as to the Lord. It is only our daily bread that we are encouraged to ask for. The present is the only time in which any duty can be done or any grace received. So those were just some comments that I found helpful. If only we as Jehovah's Witnesses had been encouraged to simply do our best as to the Lord. How many witnesses then could have really been relieved of the ever-present guilt they felt because of doing what they were gifted to do, or for doing things that were necessary, providing for their families, and so having to perhaps work full-time. I'm going to link to another video that I did that was introducing the book Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, why I love C.S. Lewis, and also the playlist of other videos that we've done on C.S. Lewis. Thank you for listening.